Hi everybody, this is Chuck Rhein again with Calvary St. Joe, and we are going through the Bible and have made it all the way to one of my favorite books of the Bible. That's the book of Judges. And one guy that I don't know why, but seem to like or relate to, his name is Jephthah. And you got to know when you read the book of Judges that the key phrase in it was at that time there was no king in Israel, and everyone did what was right in their own eyes. And see if that applies to the generation or the culture that you and I live in today, because I think that it does. Now, what I see, and this isn't 100%, but what I look at when I look at narratives in the Bible is I believe that God at times will compare and contrast personalities in the Bible. I think you see that in the New Testament, with the denial of Christ with both Judas as well as Peter. I think that you see that in the Old Testament where you can compare and contrast King David with Saul, King Saul. And I think here in the book of Judges, I see in chapter 11 and chapter 12, a guy by the name of Jephthah, and I believe that he is there and he contrasts or compares to Samson in chapter 13. So, in a 5-minute episode, Jephthah in Judges 11, verse 1, it says, "Now Jephthah the Gileadite was a mighty man of valor," which sounds like Gideon. He was a son of a harlot, and Gilead begot Jephthah. Gilead's wife bore sons, and when his sons grew up, they drove Jephthah out and said to him, "You shall have no inheritance in our father's house, for you are the son of another woman." In verse 3, then Jephthah fled from his brothers and dwelt in the land of Tob. And it's interesting, it says, worthless men banded together with Jephthah and went out raiding with him. So if I were to compare Jephthah with Samson, we read about in chapter 13, you've got Jephthah who's basically born on the wrong side of the tracks in town. And the guy doesn't even have a chance. His mom is a harlot. And in the Old Testament, that kind of a stigma to be illegitimate would be huge, would have followed him around his entire life. Samson, on the other hand, has a prophecy given about him. The angel of the Lord shows up as he's about to be birthed into the world. And interesting enough, we covered the Nazirite vow a little bit in the book of the Numbers study that we did, but Samson is the only one I think in the Bible that takes a Nazirite vow for life. That's pretty significant. What's really interesting to me is that Jephthah really is a mighty man of valor, like we just read in verse 1. And he ends up, his family says, "Hey, you need to leave. We're kicking you out of town." He goes kind of like King David. He commandeers or leads some worthless men, which happened with King David. And basically, the people ask him to come back to his homeland and to become a judge. Well, you've got Samson, on the other hand, in chapter 13, who really does not live according to the Nazirite. You can read that he scoops honey out of a dead animal. That's a violation of the Nazirite. He just did not seem to have a heart for God. And it wasn't really till the end of his life, at the very end, when he's in chains and he's in bondage and his eyes are inoperable, that he actually is able to carry out the will of the Father in regards to the Philistines. But here with Jephthah, you've got him living a pretty exemplary life until the very end. There in chapter 12, he had made a foolish vow. And his vow was that whatever came out of his house at the end of his victory would be basically an offering to the Lord, and it ended up being his daughter. How many of us can relate with saying something regrettable, making even a vow or a promise to God? Gosh, if I think about my life before Christ, I'm sure I had many of those just fox I don't know, just moments where I'm calling out to God and I want the pain to subside, but I'm not ready to commit. I'm not embracing a personal relationship with God. And with Jephthah, he makes a small mistake, and I don't know that his daughter necessarily died. I've read different commentators, and I don't believe that's the case. But maybe an application for you and I today is that, we need to be careful about the words that we use, and especially about promises that we make to God, because he listens and he notes these things, and he will oftentimes hold us to them. And, if we want to do something for the Lord, he knows what's in our heart. Let's just be careful about how rash we are, and continue to seek out books like Judges. So thanks for tuning in, and I'll talk to you soon.